We've been talking about pollutants. We looked at POPs. We looked at heavy metals, endocrine disruptors, noise pollution, thermal pollution, asbestos. And I don't think that people always think of pathogens as being a pollutant. Well, that's why I prefer to call this chapter toxin. Pathogens are toxic to us. And that's actually where we're heading for next week. What does that word toxic mean? How do we measure it? How do we solve some of these toxicology issues? A pathogen is something that is infectious, an infectious agent. It makes us sick. How it gets into your body is important. Does it absorb? Does it inhale? Does it ingest? Climate change can actually increase the outbreaks of pathogens. Mosquitoes actually drive the first 3 pathogens that I'm going to show you. Mosquito-based. And if you know anything about where mosquitoes usually breed, they like standing water. So a lot of times that's in swampy areas. But in urban areas, we sometimes have places where water collects as well. And you can see that because the rest of the area was dry, mosquitoes moved into those urban spots. Climate change is causing not just mosquito-borne illnesses to spread away from the equator, but we're seeing it with any pathogen that likes warmer weather. As the planet heats up, we tend to see a lot of these. For example, malaria, which is one that College Board wants you to know. Malaria is typically associated with mosquitoes and in the sub-Saharan African countries. And we see that extends across to South America, Asia as well. Do you guys remember why this part of the world is dry? Why we get the Saharan desert, the dry southwestern United States? It's the trade winds, yeah, the Hadley cell that goes up at the equator and then down at 30 degrees north. And so it creates rainforest down here and dry bands across. Because things are warming up and the whole rest of the United States is becoming more tropical, we're going to see these diseases expand. The next one that is mosquito-driven is called West Nile virus. You can see this one bounces back and forth between birds and insects. And then when the insects bite us, then mammals can be infected. And our third mosquito-based pathogen is Zika. It can be passed through the placenta. So we particularly worry about Zika for mothers who are pregnant. And it can also be shared sexually. So I don't know if it's technically an STD, but that's one way that it moves. West Nile virus, Zika virus, they are viral infections, which means that antibiotics don't actually do anything to help with those symptoms. Okay, another thing that helps drive the spread of pathogens, not just climate change and climate situations, but the role of sanitation and poverty. And we know mosquitoes are driven to, once again, standing still polluted water. That's where they lay their eggs. This kind of ties in. So here we have now a switch. We're looking at bacterial infections. And the first one is called dysentery. So basically think a whole bunch of diarrhea. It's gastrointestinal. And once again, in poor areas where they don't have proper sanitation, they don't have good water systems or any type of health care, the water can actually have fecal matter in it. And if you don't have proper filtration, obviously that can make you very sick. In places that are poor, they still have outbreaks of cholera. Poor hygiene. And so, once again, diarrhea, vomiting, those are the big symptoms here. The plague is also bacterial, and most people think rats. Their fleas then can bite the animals and then bite us and transmit it. Because it's bacterial, antibiotics work on it, at least for now, until the bacteria mutate and our antibiotics stop working. That's why doctors are sometimes hesitant to prescribe antibiotics. If we overuse them, they become ineffective. We always think of the Middle Ages, the 1400s, rats, 50 million people died, but they didn't have any type of modern medicine. There were no antibiotics. In the modern era, plague is making a small comeback, even in the Western United States. This thing is still around. We have not eradicated it. Next up, we got tuberculosis, bacterial again. Now, this is one that is through aerosol, right? Where this masks would help us not spread TB. And this one affects the lungs. You're going to have a big cough. Coronavirus is a family of viruses, and it's been around a long time. It's not like this is a brand new thing that has surprised most of us. Scientists have been warning about an outbreak like this for years. That's why we call it COVID-19. There's been other versions identified and studied before it. They just haven't been as fatal. They haven't spread as quickly. The two that College Board wants you to know, I have put in the yellow boxes. So make sure you learn these. I'll put them on a review sheet before the actual exam. Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, called MERS. That's actually the more recent one. We identified it in Saudi Arabia, 2012. And since then, it's killed close to 1,000 people. And then before that, we had SARS. You can see as severe acute respiratory syndrome. So both of these affect our breathing. And that's what COVID-19 does too, right? It is a particle, and that's why masks are so effective at slowing down the spread. We have to invest in monitoring these different viruses that emerge and how they mutate and change. But what we have accomplished this year, the speed that those vaccines were developed, is maybe the most awesome thing humans have ever done. Because if we can put a dent in this trend of respiratory viruses mutating, that's going to make all of our lives way easier. Now, the last thing I want to do is fear monger. Okay, I'm not trying to scare you guys. I'm not trying to say that your next 20 years of your life are going to be ruined. I want you to live your lives and have fun and enjoy being alive. Why are all these pathogens spreading, especially these respiratory viruses? It turns out that these coronaviruses, a lot of them mutate and jump from animals to humans. We see that MERS came from camels. And we think before that, probably bats. SARS was bats and small mammals. Why are they happening more frequently? We're taking away these animals' habitat. That was something we talked about first semester. As we invade their space, we are interacting with these animals more than we ever used to. We're fragmenting where they live, and they are defending themselves. So the big takeaway today is that pathogens are spreading for three main reasons: climate change, sanitation, and habitat loss.